Nate, how's it going?
Hello again, Ryan. Thank you for having me back.
This is take two for us, correct?
It is. It is. Very happy to be here. How's your day going so far?
So far, so good. I know we're different coasts, so I'm on my third cup of coffee. I think
Wow.
you're probably further along than I am.
Yeah, I've been drinking a lot of tea. I've discovered a hot cinnamon spice tea that I really love.
Oh, you might have to share that recipe with the audience. That's interesting. Once again, you are blowing me out of the water. I work for Gladly, yet you are the one rocking the great outfit and the great Gladly green again. So much appreciated.
It's my pleasure, Ryan. If you got it, wear it.
And clearly you have done this a few times with the work from home setup and love the microphone in the background. You've got this dialed in.
Yeah, $20 on Amazon, and this is actually me sitting in my bedroom with some cheap shiplap from Home Depot. So you too can have this.
Awesome. Well, let's get. Thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate it. Nate and I are going to be jumping in here to how to handle customer service operations in trying times. Lots to discuss. Just for a recap, I'm Ryan Flourish. I lead product marketing at Gladly. Nate, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Nate. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I am the CXO of Officium Labs, and I'm the founder of CX Accelerator.
Standard boilerplate for everybody out there. Feel free to ask questions. We'll do our best maybe this time around if we see some interesting questions pop up to answer them during the presentation. Reality is we might hold most of them till the end of the presentation. So be sure to ask questions. You should see a Q&A panel either on the likely on the bottom of your screen. So feel free to type questions along the way. And like always, we will do our best to answer them, as many as we can. And if not, we will personally reach out and answer them after the meeting in the next day or two. So before we jump in, just a little bit about Gladly for those that might not be familiar. We're a people-centered customer service platform. What does that actually mean? In Gladly, there's no concepts of ticket or cases, which makes us very unique out in the market. Everything is centered around people, your customers, all through all the channels they reach out over are all tied to a friendly face and a name. And other than no tickets and case numbers, Gladly has built all of our channels natively and from the ground up. So voice, chat, self-service, social, you name it. We've built that into Gladly. Which gives us some unique capabilities when it comes to routing, personalizing service, and a bunch of other fun things. But we're not here to talk about Gladly. We're here to talk about how to operate in trying times. And first things first, before we jump into that subject, Nate and I just wanted to do an extended reach out saying, hope you all are doing well. Before this webinar kicked off, Nate and I were actually just catching up on how life's been, what's changed for both of us over the last few months. And we were just going back and forth talking about some silver linings of reconnecting with friends and family and loved ones, which has been really nice. We do appreciate you joining. We know these are trying times for your brands, for your CX operations. So we do appreciate the time. And I always like to think with these type of things, if you can take away one learning out of everything we talk about today, that's probably a fundamental success in Nate and my book. So hopefully you take one piece of valuable information that helps improve your business as a whole going forward over the next few weeks.
Well said, Ryan.
Thank you, Nate. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to cover two, I would say, high-level topics, going over the idea of agent empowerment, customer empathy, which I think are really important for, especially today. And then we're going to get a little bit more tactical towards the end of the presentation, which I'm calling some more tips and tricks around decreasing high call volumes, wait times, which will get a little more tactical at the end with tips and tricks. So with that, let's dive into agent empowerment. I know Nate especially has a bunch of great thoughts and ideas when it comes to agent empowerment. And before actually going into that, we're going to try out something new in our webinars, which is some poll questions for the audience. So before we get into this section, as a springboard, I had a question for the audience and all of you out there. What has been the hardest challenge of a work from home environment? I have a guess here at what probably likely the most popular answer will be. Nate, I wonder if you have an idea as well, but give everybody here 15, 20 seconds if you can go ahead and take a stab and make a selection.
Yeah, well, I was looking for the selection option of my neighbor's kids screaming all the time, and it's not on there.
I actually have a great story. Yesterday, I did a webinar, and about 5 minutes in, there were a bunch of folks doing construction right outside my house in a big open window. And it just was an insane test of focus, which was they were knocking on the window, knocking on the door,
wow,
waving. Yeah, it was a challenge. So there's lots of those out there.
Indeed.
Awesome. Looks like we have some answers in. Team motivation and focus by a landslide. That's what I was expecting. No love for team availability and for scheduling, communication and knowledge sharing. That's great to see. We're going to touch on that here in a bit. Managing team performance got a few votes. Team focus and motivation. I actually think that is a great segue into our first subject here.
Yeah, I was interviewing with a psychologist last week named Phil Herndon, brilliant man. And he was telling me the most exhausting thing that the human body can do is having to make decisions. It's a mental taxation that happens. And right now, we're having to make a tremendous number of unexpected decisions. If our kids are back in the home and we're having to homeschool them, we're having to figure out when we can go out and get toilet paper. How are we going to feed our family? There's so many decisions that are having to be made in and outside of our job that we're all just mentally exhausted a little bit.
Yeah.
And these heavy emotions that are entering in to play right now. And, there's a couple paths that those emotions can go down. And really, what we're trying to do as leaders is to help our people give them energy to be able to make good decisions and bring life to their job. But then also we want to guide those negative emotions down a path of healthy and informed, managed fear, rather than that developing into a very negative anxiety, which will just continue to steal the life out of your agents and out of yourself if allowed to do so. So it's not surprising that that's what the poll comes back with. It's hard to motivate right now, and people are exhausted from having to make all these decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's even more stressful and bumps up the anxiety, like you mentioned, when those decisions are having to be made without a lot of information and understand if it's the right decision, right? This is so new to all of us that we're second guessing ourselves, whether it's professionally or personally, on every decision we're making. And it's just that adds to that level of stress, I think. So yeah, no surprises there. So Nate, maybe kick us off here. I know this is near and dear to you. As we go into the idea of agent empowerment, you fundamentally talk about this all the time, which I think is great. So doubling down now more so than ever on a culture of safety. So why don't you kick us off here, Nate, with your thoughts?
Sure, my pleasure. I mean, if we think of our agents like a wellspring, I mean, they're going to be bubbling over with the experience that they're currently having. And if they're tired, if they're exhausted, if they're not being filled back up, they're not going to be able to bubble over and create a great experience for your customers. And the bottom layer in Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that ability to feel safe. And only when that is secured can we move up to that next level in the hierarchy and be able to help to take care of others. So right now, I mean, it's hard. It's difficult, but we have to really focus on our ability to take care of our agents and give them life, create an experience for them that they can then offer to customers.
Yeah, I think that's well put. I think I'd go straight to the second bullet point here, which is part of that safety mechanism is fundamentally understanding your agents, your team's lives are changing, right? Everyone's at home. We've discussed a little bit about personal life balance, work, normal operating hours are a mess right now for most folks, and just embracing the fact that things are going to have to change. Your team can't operate at the same level they're used to. SLAs, are going to have to decrease or change in a certain way. And I think part of making folks feel safe and establishing that culture of safety you just talked about is embracing that and letting everyone understand, hey, these things are going to change. I don't expect you to operate at the same level you've operated for the last year, which has been at that A+ level. And that simple instruction from managers to their team, I think will go a long way. It doesn't make it easier, but I think it helps as far as transparency.
Well said. And I've been using the word grace a lot. I think it's just so critical. I mean, we've been focused on extending grace to our customers because our customers are burned out, no doubt, and we need to help and guide them to the best resolution we possibly can. But but we have to be extending as much or more grace to the agents that are delivering this support. I mean, my wife was in the grocery store a couple weeks ago and was just kind to one of the staff members at Publix who was restocking the shelves. And I remember her coming back and just being blown away by the response of this person who said, "Thank you for not yelling at me." And she needed help finding an item he didn't know. And she's like, "Hey, no worries. That's fine." And his response was, "Thank you for not yelling at me." And the psychology there is, think about the day that person had just had, and that so many of our agents, our workers are having in relation to the customers who are responding in ways that are very difficult. So, I mean, in order for us to create an experience for our agents where they can handle that scenario on all day, it's going to require a lot of grace from us. And if we look at the tenets of a traditional contact center environment, adherence, quality monitoring, I mean, these are the things that are so hard right now. I mean, you're not going to be able to adhere to a schedule like you could before. Quality monitoring on your support calls, I mean, that could be enough to break someone emotionally who normally carries a very high CSAT and other things, but right now they're struggling in this new environment, more difficult customers, difficult working environment, and they're not going to have the ability to make the same quality scores that they did before. So how do we react to that? That means we don't do exactly the same quality process that we did before. We have to find ways to give grace even in those functions.
Yeah, awesome. Listening to you talk through that, had a question came to mind, which is I'm sure a lot of our audience, CX leaders, is sitting there going like, "Oh, this sounds great. Culture of safety. I love it. This is how I want to manage my team. How do I do that? Knowing in the back of my head, there's a reality where I might have to cut hours, or there might be no ability for me to commit to my team, that layoffs might not happen in the future." I hope that's not the case for everybody listening, but I think we all know and are seeing that a bunch out there. How do those seem like just two completely contradictory ideas, right? Of creating a culture of safety and knowing in the back of your head you can't guarantee hours or even roles to a certain degree. Any thoughts on that? How do you kind of tackle all those when it comes to a culture of safety?
It's a tough question, Ryan. But I mean, just as people, think about how hard it is to do your job well and also wonder if your job is going to be there. We have very limited emotional bandwidth in which we can apply excellence and apply energy towards our jobs. So we do have to feel safe and secure and feel like we can trust our organization to be able to act in our best interest wherever they can. So yeah, there are scenarios right now where leaders are having to make tough and terrible decisions about their people. But I mean, I guess my encouragement would be, we just have to be as clear and transparent as we possibly can. We are in a world of bad information right now. It feels like nobody knows what's going on, and truth is so hard to find. And it would be way better, Ryan, if at times people would just say that they don't know, rather than claiming that they do know what the answer is. So when we do know a truth, when we can say, look, this is the reality of our financial situation. We are doubling down on customer support. It has never been more important than it is right now. When you can authentically say that and inspire that confidence in your people, you need to do that and communicate as much as you possibly can and give them that assurance and give them that circle of safety. But if you can't, don't fake it. People are too smart. And what they want from you in those moments is transparency. Tell me what you can, when you can, and allow me to trust you through this difficult process.
Well put. I think it just keeps coming back to transparency and honesty. And I think that's when I think about culture of safety and everything you've written and spoken on previously in other conversations we've had, it always seems to come back to that. And I just think it's the fundamental takeaway. So for our audience out there, when in doubt, I think just over communicate and be radically transparent as much as you can. Before we move on to this, I think one line there at the bottom, limit meetings. It's near and dear to me, actually. I think I've noticed over the last few weeks, even through all the brands we work with here at Gladly, that there's a dramatic increase in meetings. The natural impulse, I think, for companies at this stage is any new idea when it comes to communication, throw a meeting on the calendar. But I think some practical advice to our audience is, knowing what we've already discussed around people's schedules, personal lives are kind of intertwined with their professional lives at the moment. Just really think about putting things down on paper, writing down thoughts, sharing those things asynchronously before reverting to a meeting, I think is a practical tip. It's even something we do here at Gladly that has paid dividends during these last few weeks, is just turning yourself into more of a reading, writing culture to get people aligned and resisting that first impulse, which is, I have an idea, let me throw 5, 6 people on a meeting, when it probably could have been solved offline. So just something to think about. Don't know if you have anything to add to that, Nate. If not, we can move on.
Let's move on.
Cool.
Agreed.
Perfect. Fill the knowledge void. So I think part of when I think about filling the knowledge void, something that I gravitate towards, and we've heard a lot from the brands we work with, is a lot of companies have internal knowledge bases that they operate off of. But when you're not working in an office, you revert typically when you're in that office setting to leaning over to a neighbor and asking a question, maybe putting a customer on hold for a few seconds to getting that quick answer. We're in a world now where that knowledge void is gone. You have to rely on more systems and internal knowledge. And I think this is putting and stress testing that with companies at the moment. So I think knowledge is really important right now when it comes to getting internally, especially agents, quick answers, especially with things they might not know a lot about right now, given different circumstances in the market.
Oh, man. Yeah. I feel like a bit of a prophet in this area in some ways, because I've been saying for years that knowledge is the lifeblood of your support organization, and just beckoning people to move towards a knowledge-centered service type of strategy where we break the silos that are naturally created inside of a support department. I mean, people love to protect themselves and love to be the person that holds all the knowledge so that I could never lose my job. And that's been kind of a legacy way of thinking for decades inside of customer service environments. And that's one thing that newer generations have really helped us to accelerate the breaking down of that way of thinking. I mean, newer generations love to share. They're very gregarious with their knowledge. I mean, let's put it out there. Let's make it public. And so we're in a new phase of thinking and structuring a knowledge-centered service environment inside of our support centers, and we need to take advantage of it. It really is the lifeblood of the support organization. There's a vendor that put out, a major CRM vendor late last year, put out a productivity report, and it was fascinating to me to see that the many agents, over half of the agents responding on this report, were indicating that they spend between half an hour and 2 hours every day seeking for remedial knowledge that should be immediately accessible inside of a knowledge base. So, I mean, that burns out your agents so much that they have to waste that much time searching for information that should be immediately available. And it's ultimately the customer left holding the bag. They're waiting for information that they should have been able to have to resolve their issue very quickly. And they're waiting for this response. So having a sophisticated knowledge capability from the tool set, but then also your ability to curate that with supporting processes and the culture of sharing knowledge from agent to agent, it's so critical.
Yeah, I think it just comes, I even go a little, I'm an outlier in this, but I think companies are starting to realize this. When you're faced with a decision to hire a few more agents to keep up with increases in loads, I always tell the brands we work with, hire one dedicated content person. Like that might solve the need for 2, 3 more additional agents. If you're evolving your knowledge base really quickly, you're able to get quicker answers to customers. And I find a good knowledge program typically alleviates the higher volume problem instead of putting more manpower towards that, towards solving that. So couldn't agree more. Yeah. I've also noticed in the last few weeks a really strong alignment between internal and external knowledge, which I think fundamentally gets overlooked sometimes. Is you might have all your internal agents on the same page with the right scripts or the right playbooks. But if your self-service and your public FAQs are saying something different, you're leading down a path of just confusion and extra work as well. So I think always thinking about not only internal knowledge and best practices, but making sure your external knowledge sharing is aligned with what you're saying internally, and rapidly evolving that pays dividends as well.
I like that point. I had a funny one. It was a few months ago now, but it was one of these movie subscription services that I was a part of. I think the company might be dead at this point, but it speaks to this. I mean, they had a knowledge base article that had been created internally that was made public facing to the customers. And it had that capability at the bottom where customers could rate the helpfulness of the knowledge base article. Well, I mean, it was rated like negative 1,000, whatever. Like it was rated very, very, very poorly and had been out there for some time. But yet that was never seen or picked up on by the internal staff, that they had a knowledge base article that was out there in front of customers that was pissing them off. So having the coordination between your internal knowledge and making the right things customer facing that are going to be helpful and guiding customers to the best resolution path, it's very important.
Absolutely. Before we move on to this, because I know our audience is curious, what's Nate Brown's typical type of go-to movie? What's that movie subscription service?
Oh my goodness. Well, I hate to back. I mean, it was MoviePass that I was a part of. So now that I've already used the company's name, I was so mad at a bot that I was trying to get help with through the mobile app that I found myself screaming at my cell phone, and I almost threw it against the wall at one point. So yeah, I mean, self-service is great when it's great, but when it's bad, I mean, it can be one of the most infuriating things in the world when you can't get to a live agent.
Yep. We have some pretty unique perspectives on that from a Gladly perspective, but we'll save that for a later webinar because I think that could be its own subject on its own.
Perfect.
Right tools for success. I think moving, obviously, a lot of companies are being pressure tested right now, even like a simple thing, which is phones hooked on the desk. Those are no longer available. So I think practical advice is it might be time to get off-prem with your voice provider, move to the cloud if you're not doing so already. I think Moscow method, Nate, that's something you've discussed in the past. Maybe you can expand on that for our audience.
Oh yeah, now, Justin Robbins introduced me to this, and I think it's just absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's fascinating to me how we cripple ourselves with tools. When we don't know what to do, we go buy a tool, Ryan. And the average, the number of custom applications that the average enterprise company has, 464. Tools inside of the organization.
Doesn't surprise me.
So I mean, it's insanity what we've done to ourselves. Do you think information is flowing between those tools? Do you think that's helping or hindering people's ability to actually function in a simple environment? It's killing people, both internally and externally, because something like 250 of those are customer facing tools. So we have to simplify our tool set, and it's one of those where, just like customer experience, where we need to think about it more holistically. If we're looking at the end-to-end customer journey, this extends beyond customer support. But yet we love to protect our department, control our department, and make decisions about our tool set, us. And I get that, because it's hard to collaborate with leaders that you may or may not even have a lot of respect for. And so you're trying to protect your team. But what ultimately happens is that you create little fortresses of wasted expense on replicated technology, fortresses of data and knowledge that needs to be passed through, because we need that information to flow cross-functionally throughout the business. So Moscow is a cross-functional view of the needs of the larger organization. How can we prioritize the needs that we have together and work together to pick the right simplified tool set so that we can work together more effectively? It's a great model.
Awesome. Do you think, it sounds like that boils down to just before you go make that impulse buy to jump to a solution and something new to solve the problem, just having the discipline to really think through what problem you're trying to solve and understand what the challenges are, and then go see if actually a solution, something to purchase, is needed. It sounds like what you're kind of the main argument you're trying to put forward there.
Absolutely. We all want to leave our own stamp on the world. We all want to create our own legacy, and we want to protect our teams. Generally speaking, buying our own independent tool set is not the way to do that. And it actually leads to the opposite of improved agent experience.
Yep. Perfect. All right. Let's jump into another subject. So we just went through agent empowerment. I think that's a good springboard into the idea of customer empathy. Nate, when we were discussing what we wanted to talk about in this webinar, I think this was my favorite bullet point that you suggested, which is, I think you put it, extra servings of empathy and grace. And of course, we shortened it for a PowerPoint here. But maybe you can kick us off again, because I think you have some really great thoughts around empathy and grace during these times.
Yeah, no doubt. And I know we talked about it a little bit at the top, but I mean, it's one of these situations where we have all this baggage of emotion. And in pre-pandemic, if you look at the numbers of worry and stress, they were already tremendously on the rise, both in America and internationally. So, I mean, we had a bit of a mental health thing already going on before this. And now, I mean, the levels of stress, you can't even imagine what people are thinking and feeling. And we're having to all find ways to cope with this new reality. And I mean, even for me, I mean, I'm finding when I'm anxious, when I don't understand what's going on, or if I feel off kilter, it comes out in the form of a lack of patience. I'm not as patient with my family. I'm not as patient in a customer service scenario. So we know that customers are lashing out at our agents and at people in ways that they traditionally would never have. And that's, that's just a tough reality. But we have to give so much grace and so much understanding and so much energy to our people that they can then be equipped to extend that same energy and grace all the way through to the customer as much as humanly possible. I mean, it's the only way to do it. And, personalization is key. This might not be the moment right now to dive into a full personalization effort, but as we were talking about pre-webinar, Ryan, people find identity through the brands that they do business with, and they want to feel known because of their relationship to you as a brand, as an organization. And so the more that we can personalize that experience for them and make them feel like they're just not another customer, they're just not a number, but they're somebody that we're really proud that they represent our brand and they're out there being ambassadors for us. It's amazing how far that can go in terms of customer loyalty long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's just simple things in my mind, which you're right. Maybe now is not the time to really dive into fix some of the personalization issues, even though I think those always go a long way. But it's just simple things when a customer is reaching out right now for the 7th, 8th time asking about an order that's been delayed, which they probably understand the reason why things are going to be delayed. Ask them what their name is, what they're calling about, and just spending some time to understand that will go a long way instead of picking up the phone and going, "Hey, Nate, I understand you're waiting on your shipment. Apologies again. We still don't have an update on it," is very different than me picking up the phone and going, "Hello, what's your name? What are you calling about? What's your order number?" And I think those simple things you're discussing, which is stress is at a high, or like those little triggers and ticks that go from not a big deal to a huge extreme ordeal for something so simple. So I think those type of simple things can go a long way with customer empathy.
Yeah, well said. I mean, people are already afraid entering the transaction. They're already on the defensive because they need your help. And there's a vulnerability with them extending themselves and admitting that they need help from you. So it's up to us to very quickly, at the top of that customer support interaction, to disarm that customer and just somehow communicate, "I care about you as a person, and I am here to help you." And you've got like 3 seconds to somehow summarize that in your tone in the opening statement that you make. If you're calling me, Ryan, and I'm saying, "Okay, what's your order number?" I don't care about you. I want you to be off the phone, and I just want this to be over. Rather than, "Hey, thank you so much for calling, Ryan. How can I help you?" I mean, it's that simple. I've communicated to you, I care about your situation. I'm here to help you.
Yeah, it's just the little things. And I think we got to move on from this slide, but little note there, some policies might need to change. I think that's an important point to highlight for our audience. We don't know, obviously, the context of all of your brands out there and what your policies look like, but I think it is a unique opportunity when it comes to policy enforcement, knowing the state of things. If you're not doing so already, now might not be the time to really be a stickler for some of your stringent policies, whether it comes to returns, exchanges, cancellations, refunds. I think being a little more lax with those policies, given the circumstances, will actually pay dividends for you in the future when it comes to building customer loyalty and brand loyalty for let's say, a year from now. So don't know if you have anything to add to that, Nate. If not, we can push forward.
Perfect.
Awesome. Be proactive when possible. We've touched on this a bit. When we think about the idea of being proactive, we touched on it actually when we talked about knowledge sharing and the knowledge base topic. But I think there's a case to be made here when you know something internally, before your customers have to reach out and ask that question to all of your agents and increase call volume, be extremely proactive with that message. Maybe you know that all of your shipments are going to be delayed an extra week, and you just sent out last week an update to your customers letting them know it's going to take was going to be delayed a week already. And I think instead of putting the onus on your customers when that information is known to call in and get that information, put it out there, whether it's sending a message, email to your customers, whether it's putting it right at the top of your FAQ page in a banner where everybody goes before they chat into you. I think those simple proactive measures go a long way. I know, for instance, when I'm on a lot of websites now, was on my credit card company a little bit earlier today, and they're just doing a great job right at the top, announcing things right in that login page, so I never have to take a guess. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah, I mean, just think like your customer. I mean, they're having a moment of need. Where are they when they're having that moment of need, where they're going to be like, wow, I need to figure out something associated with this company that I have a relationship with? Are they going to look you up on Twitter? Are they going to go to your Facebook page? Are they going to go to your website? You got to put yourself in the mind of that customer and equip them with the information that they would need. Oh, okay. Now I know. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to call right now because I know that you have a 500 case ticket backlog or whatever it is. Just being transparent with that information and guiding customers to the best resolution path. It's amazing how far that can go.
Yeah, expectation setting. I think it just keeps coming back to, if you set the right expectations with your customers, it goes a long way. For me personally, it's going back to the credit card company I was on their website earlier today, just being very proactive. Hey, if you call us, wait times are going to take a lot longer. It puts me more in control of that decision, right? Versus the decision to call in and just not really know when I'll be helped. Again, simple things, but I think it's worth everybody thinking about critically, and they're easy things to implement, which will go a long way. Cool. Any other thoughts here, Nate?
No, I think that's great.
Awesome. And I know whenever we chat, time ticks away from us, so let's keep going. Decreasing volumes and wait times. So I think this is the part where we want to get a little more tactical and prescriptive with some of our advice. Before doing that, I believe we have another poll question. So this is our second poll question. Give everyone 10, 15 seconds here. Which of your channels have seen the biggest uptick in volume since the start of this pandemic? Give everyone 10, 15 seconds. I have a high guess as well here, but I would love to be proven wrong.
I'm going to guess that email has probably gone through the roof.
I'm leaning towards voice. I am a little biased just because I have the ability to look through a lot of our customer data.
Yes.
We're able to look through a lot of our aggregated customer data to see what's going on. So that doesn't mean it's what's happening with everyone out there, though. All right. Oh, wow. You were spot on, Nate.
Do you know why I said that? Because so many people sent out emails to their customers and made it easy for people just to respond to the emails they sent out.
Yep.
I don't know.
That's a very interesting point, is when you lean into that, you're by nature asking for a reply. So that makes a certain degree of sense. Looks like chat's pretty low, social's pretty low. Those are even. So yeah, email followed by voice. That makes a lot of sense. So thinking about kind of finishing off our session here before we get into questions, what are tips and tricks we can recommend for our audience to think about? Simple things that might be obvious, not so obvious, to help decrease some of those volumes. And I think right off the bat, when you think about if you're seeing a big uptick in voice and email, as obvious as it might sound, if those are the only two things you're offering, now might be the time to implement chats or SMS or another additional channel that I think comes with it a different set of expectations with your customers, right? If I pick up the phone and you only give me the option to call in, that has the expectation of needing to be helped now. We just launched our customer expectations report. Shameless plug for Gladly here. If you go to gladly.com, we every year survey thousands of consumers in the country, and we put out a report that says what they prefer and like when it comes to their channel mix and their expectations with their brands. And by far, every year we keep seeing going up is over 70% of consumers prefer messaging over voice. So if you're not offering other messaging channels, not only do your customers want those messaging channels and they prefer them, you're limiting yourself to the ability to take on a lot of customer interactions at once. So I know this one's pretty obvious for folks out there, but now's the time. If you have the availability and a little bit of bandwidth, I'd say if you want to decrease voice volumes, now's the time to implement things like chat and text.
Yeah, I would just add 2 quick comments on that. There's a brilliant resource in The Effortless Experience by Matt Dixon and the CEB team. In the appendix, there's actually a guide that helps you think through what would be the best channel that would offer the least effort experience for our customers. And thinking through, it's not about having the most channels and offering every channel. It's about being able to offer a high degree of quality and consistency over the very best channels that you could offer. I've heard predicted for a couple of years now that email support will disappear because our self-service capabilities are going to get so good, and people are just going to resort to so many other paths of being able to obtain that quick text-based information. If you need to call, you're going to call. If you need to do something that could be done over email, you're going to use chat, you're going to use SMS, you're going to use self-service. In fact, there are many brands that are already not providing email support.
Yep. I think it's spot on to think about too. And I think we always at Gladly think about it as the idea of giving your customers choice, right? It's all about less about you. It's more about them, giving them the options to be met where they want to be met. Yep. And you touched on it right there, which is something I get pushed back all the time, which is like, no, like we don't want to deflect to other places. Voice is important. And I think you just hit it, Nate, which is the idea of customers that prefer that. You still want to give them the options for it, but you don't want to limit that as the only options for customers that might not prefer that as the channel that works well for them. So I think it's all about emphasizing the idea of choice, and you give your customers more choice, typically better outcomes come to your organization.
If I don't know the question to ask, I'm going to call you. If I'm looking to have a dialogue and even understand the nature of what's going on, I don't have enough to be able to penetrate your self-service environment yet. I need to have that conversation with you. So I think voice is going to be around for a while, and that's not a bad thing.
Not at all. I think it still has a place when it makes sense for the type of conversation. Absolutely. A term we've kind of coined here at Gladly, and it's been out there before, is the idea of evaluating positions of honor. It's again a relatively obvious example when you think about it, but it actually pays huge dividends if you haven't already thought about evaluating positions of honor. And what do we mean by, what do I think when I think about positions of honor is, in our customer expectations report, again, we find pretty compelling evidence that consumers by nature, they click on the first thing listed on the top of a contact us page or in your mobile app as the first thing they impulsively click on. So they're typically not even reading what's voice, what's chat, what's email. They click on the first thing that's available to help. Wow. So if you have voice or you have email at the top, by nature, you're kind of leading into those impulsive clicks. So if voice volume is something that's a challenge for you right now, evaluate positions of honor on your contact us page, your IVR experience, your mobile app experience, and a simple switch of maybe putting email and chat, which has with it a different set of SLAs and expectations, will likely do good things when it comes to voice volume. So just, again, a very simple tactic if you have never looked into it. Look at your positions of honor. They typically pay big dividends for some very simple 5 to 10 minute switch. We are 5 minutes out before Q&A, Nate, so we'll keep it moving. We could probably touch on this one really, really quick. Nate, you've talked about it a bunch through this presentation, the self-service. Anything else you want to close out on self-service? I think you touched on it a few seconds ago, which is just really the idea of leaning in hard to self-service.
Yeah, no doubt. Our self-service should be good. I love when I see a service center who allows their agents to participate in the self-service process. I mean, a lot of times we turn our agents into kind of ticket machines. But, another great use for like downtime, if your agents don't have a whole bunch of ticket backlog, as it were, one great way that they can add value and be a part of something really meaningful is to help in like the creation and the curation of knowledge. So a lot of times people treat the self-service like, oh, it's over here and we can only have these resources work on it. But but I love when agents get to have a voice and have a participatory role in the creation and the curation of that self-service capability.
Definitely. I think reporting plays a big part in self-service, which I think is fundamentally overlooked a lot, which is going back to my point earlier, which sometimes is a bit controversial about like find a full-time content person now. That person can be looking through weekly reports. What are the common topics that are coming in and trending this week and have been trending the last 2 weeks? That's a good indicator for me. If a lot of volume's coming in around a specific question, get that into your FAQ section right away or your self-service widget. Understanding, again, which pages are causing on your website the most confusion from an inbound perspective might be an opportunity to put an FAQ right at the top of that page that answers that question. So I think reporting for me is always a really interesting place to start your self-service discovery after you've done the obvious stuff.
Love that. And many companies are morphing into a community capability too, in terms of offering a really creative and engaging way to not only offer self-service, but just to communicate exciting things that are going on with the future of their products and services. Having some form of a community capability, I think, is just great.
Yep. Go beyond press 0 for support. Good leapfrog here to IVR experience, which I think is a unique place for customers and brands to think about how to improve self-service as well. This kind of has a play also when it comes to positions of honor that I discussed earlier, which is making sure your IVR is doing the things it needs to do to accomplish, like you said, Nate, putting yourself in your customer's shoes. A good example of a story is we've worked with a brand over the last few weeks that was having many layers to their IVR experience, and they were noticing significant drop-offs after 3-4 levels. And I think those are unique opportunities to go like, hey, like that's obviously frustrating for our customers. How do we put self-service in unique things like I might be calling in for my order information, or I might be calling in for my loyalty information. How do you put self-service and other options at the start of your IVR experience instead of making customers drill in 4 or 5 layers deep to get those obvious questions?
Oh, goodness. No, I was hoping you'd say 3 or 4 layers, because for me as a consumer and as somebody that consults in this area, if you've got an IVR that's more than 3 layers deep, something's wrong. You haven't guided the customer to the best resolution path. If they need to call you, they need to talk to you. And they need the capability to quickly resolve their issue through an agent, generally speaking. If it's something so easy that you can do it in 1 or 2 layers of IVR, great. But generally speaking, for that type of transactional volume, we're driving them to our chat capability and to our app and to our self-service capabilities that exist outside of IVR. Yep.
I think there's also maybe final points here is your IVR can uniquely point people to the channels they prefer as well. I'm going back to the customer expectations report I mentioned earlier, which is folks prefer to chat. They prefer to text typically. If your IVR has that as the first option and you can receive a text or a pointed place to start a chat conversation, I typically will probably use that as a leapfrog into the place I prefer. So those options are out there for folks. And I think IVR is a unique place to also enhance the experience to decrease call volumes during this time. Nate, dare I say, we're coming in right at 11:45 my time, so we have 15 minutes of questions, right on time.
Landing the plane, Ryan.
All right, so just a reminder for folks, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A panel. Give everybody here maybe 15, 20 seconds to get some questions in, and then Nate and I can start answering them.
Ooh, there's a good one. What is an SLA? Great question. An SLA is a service level agreement. And it's basically either a very formal or maybe a little less formal obligation, an expectation that you set with your customers in terms of the service you're going to provide to them. So as an example, we might put out an SLA over the phone and say, we're going to pick up that phone call within 30 seconds of you dialing that number. You're going to get a live agent within 30 seconds. That would be a very aggressive service level agreement. Whereas a more traditional SLA would say, we're going to get to your phone call within 2 to 4 minutes.
Yeah. What's funny about that, Nate, is that question is my team is going to kill me because I am always a stickler around when you use an acronym, be sure to define it. And as the person that put these slides together, I did not define my term. So that's I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of jabs after this from my team. We got a second question here. How should we handle first interactions with guests? Porters, front desk, check-ins. This looks like a hospitality brand. I'm guessing post-COVID. Thank you. Any thoughts there? That's an interesting one. I don't know if I have an answer that jumps right off the top of my head.
Yeah, thank you, Lavinia, for that question. I think that's a great one. I'm just like dreaming about when this is over and like just the excitement of getting to look at people eye to eye and just the exuberance of basic human gestures and things. I mean, I would just say, let your people be really happy. I mean, there should be a tone of celebration with our customer interactions that we have. We have a privilege of being together. We are so glad that you are here with us, that we are alive together, and that we have the privilege of interacting with one another right now. I mean, that should be the tone of that first interaction that your people have, is just celebration and my goodness, we're so happy you're here. That would be my opinion. What do you think?
I think that's a great... That makes a ton of sense. I'm just thinking of my personal life right now. All my travel plans were squashed for the last 3-4 months, and we've canceled everything. And I know my family and friend circles are experiencing the same thing. And I know all of us are dying to book our next vacation or next trip right when we get a little visibility into the idea of when this might actually be tailing down. And I think you're right, like to be met with the enthusiasm that like, we know you're excited to get back out there and we're excited to have you. It's just, I think, a great springboard into a great conversation. It's just expressing understanding the same enthusiasm that your customers are going to be bringing to the table at the same time.
Because imagine how much of a wet blanket it would feel like. I mean, you finally get to come out of your house and book a hotel room. Something that used to be ho-hum is now this privilege. And if you're coming up and the hotel agent is just ho-hum, boring, I mean, that'll just immediately curb your enthusiasm for what you're getting to do. So I think we should tap into that excitement of how cool it is that we're doing even these basic things.
Yeah, you might have just spurred on some ideas for some fun travel hospitality marketing campaigns our audience can use, because I think that's just hearing you say that makes a ton of sense. And I would personally just gravitate towards that. And I can vouch for a bunch of folks in my circle that would do the same. All right. We got a few more questions coming in. This is great. I've been designing customer experiences for over 14 years, but I am new to the tech industry. What advice would you give someone looking to play in a new sandbox?
Wow. Yeah, what a great question. Jonathan, excellent question. Thank you for that. What I would say is you assess as you're coming into this new space, what we need in the CX profession is talented change management experts. So you're bringing a set of skills and excitement for the state of the customer that might be new to the people that you're serving alongside. And so for you, I would just say, understand what the language of change is inside of that organization. What is the change management methodology being used? Is it Lean Six Sigma? Is it an Agile or DevOps environment? Become an expert in that language of change, and then take that and apply your CX expertise into that same context. Otherwise, you're going to be trying to recreate the wheel to all these new folks and trying to speak a new language of customer experience, and you don't want to also speak a new language of change. So take the language of customer experience and put it in the same change language that they're already using. That would be my advice.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. I think that's nothing else to add on that one. I think you nailed it. Got a question here from Jack Amaral. What changes have you already made with your team since COVID in the last few weeks? Good question. I think just I can maybe take a stab at that one. I do manage a team at Gladly of 4 amazing people. And I think fundamentally, even just how managing teams, I can think of a few things. And our team that have worked well over the last few weeks, which is, I think I talked earlier about less meetings, more reading and writing. It's a hard thing to do, but I think in a remote setting where everyone's working a little more synchronously, it does pay dividends. It comes with its own set of challenges, which is trying to touch base more often. I think that's a challenge and also a good thing. So I think one big takeaway I'd recommend for folks if you're managing a team is, again, less meetings if you can. It sounds silly, but I think it's the impulse everyone goes to. And at the same time, just writing more thoughts down, encouraging people to read and contribute offline when they have the time to do things pays big dividends. I'd bubble that up as probably the most important thing to think about if you're managing a team remotely right now.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jack. And I would just say too, one pivot that I've made for several of the customers that I'm serving through Officium is prioritizing voice of employee. So we have all this voice of customer insight, but right now I'm actually considerably more focused on voice of employee and using a pulse survey capability to really assess and understand the hearts and minds of our employees, and to make adjustments wherever possible to create the very best experience for our people that are serving the customers. And, right now it's focused on wellness. How can we make our people engaged and happy and motivated? It's celebrating a lot more. It's just taking some of the pressure off in terms of, wow, we have all this momentum and all these changes we need to do in 2020, relieving some of that pressure and saying, now is a time for us to focus on ourselves, focus on serving one another, and making sure that we're healthy and happy and safe.
That's, Nate, one question there for you, for me here, and you think through that. Were there any unexpected surprises or things that jumped out at you from those pulse surveys that you're like, I didn't even think about that, and that makes total sense? I'm just curious, maybe there's nothing, but wondering if there's anything that was not even on your radar that popped out through those pulse surveys.
Yeah, and personally, I use Office Vibe for this, and I love Office Vibe. Tiny Pulse is excellent as well, but it gives you 10 areas that you can focus on that make up the employee experience. And the one that is continually surfacing pre-pandemic is wellness. And this is fascinating for us to think about, because I feel like historically people just showed up to a job and, hey, I'm going to do these things and you're going to pay me that money. But now it's like, wow, I've come into this organization. I now need to be engaged as a whole being. I expect you to give me a sense of community and identity. I expect you to help take care of me physically and mentally and otherwise. The expectations that employees have of their organizations, in my opinion, has skyrocketed. I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. It's just an interesting trend that has happened. And there's that book, Bowling Alone, that's out there that made the case for the fact that many of our community affiliations have deteriorated over the years. Many of these associations and clubs and even churches and other things are in a state of decline. So instead of us finding our identity in some of those, we're now kind of taking that need to tap into something and to find our identity. That's now being shifted over to our place of employment more and more. So people need to be engaged in the areas of physical and mental wellness. We need to help guide people on how they can be the best person that they can be. It's a lot more training than we used to have to do, and training beyond just, here's how you do your job. Here's how you become a leader. Here's how you manage your time. These training things that have become so popular is a part of that trend that we've seen. So it's just fascinating to me. I'm again, definitely don't have a clear answer here, but it is a trend that we're seeing employees expecting more and more of their employers in the area of wellness.
It makes total sense. Yeah, I think you're right. It probably varies to every company and their unique challenges, but there's some cross ideation there around like that topic that I think works for everybody. Time for a few more questions. If we were to recommend just one new channel to implement after voice and email to help with today's situations, what would that be? Very good question. My recommendation would be chat, simply because if stores are closing down, where are people going to go? They're going to instantly go to your website, whether it's to make purchases or find more information. And if you can put chat on your website as a very easy way for folks to communicate with you, I always think that's the best bet, especially in today where stores are obviously it's a lot harder to access and they're closing down and shutting down for a bit. So I would always recommend chat as the natural next place to start, knowing that people are stuck from home and they're going to your website. Nate, any thoughts there?
Normally, I would jump in right here and say app. You need to have a really good app. But knowing that we're talking more to a retail-focused set of individuals here, I'm probably not going to download your app, even if it's amazing. There's just way too many, and the type of interaction that you're having with your customers isn't deep enough and regular enough to where they're going to think, wow, I really should download this app. Unless you're really like a lifestyle brand where you have very loyal customers that are coming to you on a regular basis, you definitely need to have a great app with chat built in. But if you're a brand where you see a lot of customers and maybe once every other year, they're probably not going to download your app. So I would absolutely agree with Ryan. They're going to go to your website and they might be looking for the phone number. But instead of that, if they have a really good and really easy to use chat feature, and moving towards conversational AI capabilities through sophisticated bots and other things, they're at least going to give that a shot before they likely call you.
Yep. Yeah, I think it sounds like we're in agreement for this audience in particular. I think chat's the way to start. With stores shutting down everywhere, any creative advice for generating lost revenue? Great question. Anything jump off to you, Nate, right off the bat?
Oh, that's a tough one. If your stores are shut down and people can't get in there to buy your things, then we need to find another way for them to get the things. So this might be an opportunity to develop some third-party partnerships, some distributions that you have not considered before, selling on different online platforms or things of that nature. Developing more. Maybe this is where you focus more on your word of mouth capabilities, where you have brand ambassadors who you're equipping with product, and they're able to then represent that product to their networks. That might be where you're creating more of that community feel, that brand ambassador feel, at least until your stores are open again.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Jumping out to me right off the bat is knowing that your stores are going to be closed for a bit longer, is just knowing that your consumers are going to go online. And again, this is a unique opportunity to change your contact center and your agents into maybe being a little more revenue minded. What does that look like? Training, maybe the internal knowledge we're talking about on how to approach those conversations. Because if your customers aren't able to buy face-to-face, the next natural place if they want to buy your product is to chat in, call in, email in. So I think this is a unique opportunity to transform your cost center into thinking a little bit more about revenue generation, making sure you have the right experts that are able to help the right customer looking for a specific theme. So I think there's an avenue there of just understanding where your customers are going, which is online, and then making sure your agents are equipped to think about not just support, but also revenue to a certain degree as well.
Yeah, agreed. And even, if they're not equipped necessarily to represent that sales cycle, this is a great moment where you can have your agents focus on future development of products and services that are coming up. Let them have a voice and a role in the creation of that, and in applying the voice of customer feedback that you've gotten through the contact center to apply that to future development in a way that maybe you typically don't have the time to do. Revenue is being lost today. So think about how can we help to generate more revenue in the future. And part of that's going to be hitting the mark with your customers on the very best products possible. And your agents and your customer support center has great feedback and great insights on how to do that.
Great. All right, Nate, we're at the top of the hour. Always a pleasure. Thank you again for everybody that tuned in. Nate and I will probably be back in action at some time in the foreseeable future. Again, Nate, thank you very much. Enjoyed the conversation. Until next time.
Be well out there. Thank you, everybody.